And now, would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai?
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to the event today. I'm calling in from Vienna in Austria. I'm actually having a European book tour, so it's 1 a.m. here. But I'm so happy to be with you all, and thank you so much, Carol, for your great introduction, and for I was really moved to hear Moriel's words about my novel. He spoke about, he introduced my novel at the Dayton Literary Peace Prize award ceremony, and it was most amazing. So I was in Dayton already, and I would love to be back one day. It's an amazing city, and I met so many people there who were so warm and friendly. So I'm so glad to be seeing you today. And I would like to thank the Dayton Metro Library for having me today. Carlos, Carol, Mike, Aaron, and your team have worked so hard behind the scene to make it happen. I'm really grateful to friends of the Dayton Metro Library who generously sponsored the event. So I love libraries, and I'm so happy to be spending time with you today at the Dayton Metro Library. Actually, it was my job at the library of the international school in Dhaka in Bangladesh that brought me back to my writing dream. So, as I was little, I always wanted to become a writer, but my family told me no. They didn't want me to become a writer. So it took me, I went on and do many things in my life. And then one day my husband got posted to Bangladesh, and I got a job at the library of the American International School. And being surrounded by books, I realized how much I loved it. So I read a lot, and I organized a lot of author events like today. And I fell in love with reading again, and I returned to my writing dream. So after Bangladesh, I went back, I returned to Vietnam in around 2006, after 4 years of being in Bangladesh, and I started writing poetry, and it began my writing career in I started writing poetry in Vietnamese first, and after a while I became a translator. And then one day I was looking for a novel to translate, and I kept looking, and I didn't see anything that I wanted to spend years of my life working on. So I thought, why don't I write this novel myself? So then it began a really crazy adventure, with the mountain sing, which took me 7 years to write. So I'm here to speak with you as part of the Social Justice Speakers series. So social justice happens to be the core of my work. I fight for social justice with my actions as well as with my pen. I fight it for it with my poetry, my novel, The Mountain Sing, as well as my forthcoming novel, Dust Child. I'm really excited to let you know that I have completed a second novel in English. It's about Amerasians, children of American soldiers and Vietnamese women born and abandoned during the Vietnam War. So this novel is also very much about social justice as well. But perhaps I can begin today's event by sharing with you one of my poems related to social justice, because I said I began my career with writing poetry, and I really hope that your library has this book of mine, my book of translation, The Secret of Hassan, which contains my poetry, and I translated it from Vietnamese into English with the help of Professor Bruce Weigel. So, Bruce Weigel fought in Vietnam as a soldier. He fought in Quang Tri region, one of the most terrible battlefields in Vietnam. So he was injured as well, and he returned to the U.S. really traumatized. and then he protested against the war, and later on he spent many years translating Vietnamese literature. So I heard him read at one of the conferences in Hanoi, and I was so amazed at his poetry. So I decided to read all of his books of poems. So Bruce Weigel actually is I think he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in poetry for his book of poetry collection, Song of Napalm. So I highly recommend you to check out his work. So anyway, so I translated his poetry, and I took him on a book tour throughout Vietnam, where we had so many veterans of the Vietnam War who had fought against him, who came to the reading, and we laughed and we cried together. And I really think about the power of literature in bringing people together. And so so Bruce asked me, where's your poetry in English? You translate people's work. Why don't you translate your own work? So, okay, so I began translating my poetry, and with his help, I had it published in the US. So I will share with you this poem called Baby Lift. So Operation Baby Lift was carried out during the last days of the American War in Vietnam. According to information from the American side, more than 3,300 children considered to be orphans were airlifted from the south of Vietnam in 1975 and were adopted in the US and several other countries such as Australia, France, and Canada. However, some of those children were not orphans, and many have returned to Vietnam to find their birth parents with very little hope. So I watched a TV program about them, and I felt such longing for their parents and such desperation, because many of them have tried for so many years and they have no clue how they can find their parents. They have done so many things like DNA tests and so on, but it's really difficult. Baby lift, lifted high, flung into the world, another country, another embrace. This is the fate of the bewildered children, their skin still fuming from the fire of their evacuation. They come home, their hair not blonde, their skin not white, their tongues without Vietnamese. But no diet of milk and butter can answer the 35 years old question, who am I? No adopted arms can replace their parents' embrace. No DNA test can link them with their origin. And black hair cannot think in Vietnamese. Baby lived over 12,000 days of tears, over 35 years of pain, and still the questions have their eyes wide open. I wrote this poem in 2010. So this was one of the poems that I wrote during the start of my writing career. So as you can see, I started writing about social issues from very early on. So my poetry is about the garbage collectors in Vietnam, the street sellers. I like to write about ordinary people of Vietnam because I feel like I want to celebrate their hard work, their hope, their dreams. If you go to Vietnam, you see such energy in the working people. Vietnam is a country that never sleeps. I just returned from a visit to my homeland, and like at night you go out on the street, you see street sellers, you see people still working and selling things. Because I wrote this poem originally in Vietnamese, so may I share it with you in the Vietnamese language, because I think Vietnamese language is very, very special. Baby lived, nhấc bổng quăng vào một thế giới khác, một xứ sở khác, một vòng tay khác. Những phận trẻ thơ ngơ ngác, da bốc khói cuộc di tản. Họ đã về, tóc không vàng, da không trắng, miệng không tiếng Việt. Không bơ sữa nào có thể trả lời cho câu hỏi dài hơn 35 năm, sâu hơn 12.775 ngày. Tôi là ai? Không vòng tay cưu mang nào ướm vừa vòng tay cha mẹ. Không xét nghiệm DNA nào có thể nối họ với cội nguồn. Mái tóc đen không nghĩ bằng tiếng Việt. Baby Lift lật 12.775 tờ lịch bằng nước mắt. Đi qua 35 năm bằng nỗi đau, những câu hỏi vẫn trừng trừng mở mắt. So, the war has gone by for nearly 50 years, but there are still tens of thousands of people in Vietnam who haven't found their families. My second novel, Dust Child, about Amerasians, children of American soldiers and Vietnamese women, to be published in March 2023, really soon, is about the desperate search for family members of these Amerasian children. So I did some research, and I was shocked to find out that there are around nearly 100,000 of these mixed children born during the Vietnam War, and most of them were abandoned, and later on they the American government passed a law called the Amerasian Homecoming Act, because Amerasian children were really discriminated against in Vietnam. A lot of them were living on the street and were homeless and were abused. So the act enabled them to go to immigrate to the U.S., and they could bring family members along. And because they had because of the fear of the communists, so when the war ended, if the mother still kept these Amerasian children, they burned all of their papers. So these Amerasian children normally didn't have any paper, so anyone could claim them as families. So Vietnamese started selling and buying Amerasians, so they were really subject to a lot of abuse. So my second novel is about that. It's about human rights of Amerasians, and also the pain and trauma experienced by their family members. If you watch Hollywood movies about Vietnam, you often see stories of bad girls, such as in the musical Miss Saigon. You will see that Kim is a bad girl who depended on her American boyfriend to rescue her. And there are a lot of stereotypes against Vietnamese women like that, that we don't have agency, we are not complex at all, we need men to rescue us. So in this novel, I write against that. I include the stories of two Vietnamese farmers who had to go to Saigon and become bar girls, and they had to work as prostitutes for Americans. And I want to show their humanity, to show the circumstances of their job, and what pushed them into their decisions, and why one of them had to abandon her son. I wanted to show, the destruction that the military, that imperialism and colonization can have on countries. For example, the American military, caused a lot of damage to the social fabrics in Vietnam, to our culture. Like during the Vietnam War, tens of thousands of women had to serve in bars, in brothels, to they had to become sex workers to serve the needs of American soldiers. So it was and I did research, and I interviewed these women, and some of them have not been able to share their past with any of the family members. they have to hide that fact. When they worked as bar girls, they had to hide it from their families. And until today, they still have to hide it from people. So, as part of my research for this novel, I wrote about American veterans who went back to Vietnam after more than 40 years and tried to look for the children they once abandoned. And I helped one veteran find the ex-girlfriend who was pregnant with his child. And she told me she had not, she was married. She's now married with children, but her family did not know that she had any relation with this American man and that she had a child. So you can imagine the burden of sorrow that these women, had to carry within themselves. As mothers, they had to give away their babies and they could not share it with anyone. So this lady that I found, she cries so much to me because she said, for more than 40 years she was not able to share it with anyone, and she did not know, and she doesn't know until today whether her daughter was dead or alive. So it's really painful. So it's very emotional for me to write this novel. And recently, I was translating for an Amerasian who found her father after like 50 years. So she was born during the Vietnam War, and she was abandoned by her mom, who worked as a bar girl. And so she gave her this Amerasian, her name is Dell, to a friend, and this friend went on and sold Dell for some gold to a couple who exploited her as slave. So Dell grew up without going to school. She told me there were days that she had to sleep outside of the house when the weather was really cold. And when she went to, because she was adopted by this family who lived near the jungle, so she had to go into the jungle and do the farming, and some days she had no food at all, and she was not allowed to go to school. And when I met her recently in Vietnam, I saw that I invited her to lunch, and she could not eat because she only had 2 teeth left. She did not have access to to medical services, so she had only 2 teeth left. And by DNA testing, she managed to find her father just a few months ago. So I translated for them, and they were crying so much. It's really a miracle. But people don't normally know that these stories, that there are still tens of thousands of Amerasians still looking for their parents. And the sad fact is that most American veterans do not want to acknowledge their children, because most of these men went to Vietnam as young boys. They did not want serious relationships. They did not want children, and they want to put the war behind them. So when they were contacted, they were shocked. Like Dell's father did not know he had a child in Vietnam. He was actually married when he went to Vietnam, and he had this relation with a bar girl, and he did not know the bar girl was pregnant. So he returned to the US, and recently, he did not go for the DNA test. It's a family member who went for the DNA test, and by coincidence found that had a match with the DNA of Dell. I'm only sharing their story because I have their permission. It's really a miracle. And I share this story with the hope that more American veterans would acknowledge their children when they are approached by their Amerasian children, because I know so many Amerasians who are looking for their parents and want to be accepted by their parents. So it's really an emotional issue. So that's the novel, Dust Child, which will be coming out next year, and I hope to be back and to speak with you about it next year when the novel is out. So today I'm going to share with you about my work and discuss a social justice from my experience. And afterwards, I would love to have a conversation with you about what we can do together to improve social justice. So I hope you will have lots of questions for me. So as I prepared for the event today, I was thinking about the definition of social justice, and I found this really this simple but effective definition. Social justice means that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. It's a simple definition, right? And it's just everyone on this earth deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. This is simple but so hard to achieve. As a human race, we are facing so many crises relating to social justice, healthcare, refugees crisis, racial discrimination, income gaps, hunger, food insecurity, poverty, homelessness, gender inequality, violations of human rights. And social justice has been made worse because of crises such as wars and armed conflicts, as well as the COVID pandemic. You know, my heart is broken watching, you know, the war in Ukraine. You know, I cannot believe that we are witnessing, you know, such a terrible war and not being able to do anything about it. You know, I remember when I was 6 years old, I was standing on the village road, you know, on the road of my village. I was looking at the devastation around me, and I was just thinking, you know, the human race would not be so stupid as to wage another war. I was a child, and I firmly believed in that. I was looking at the women, the people with their arms and legs around me, people who had lost their family members, people who were still searching for their family members. And as a child, I was thinking, you know, we all children of Mother Earth. How can't we love each other more? Why can't we stop wars? And I'm, you know, growing up, I realized how naive I am, because I think there's too much power and greed behind each war. So it's difficult to stop wars. However, we should not lose hope. The fact that we are sitting here today and having this discussion today about social justice gives me hope. And thank you so much for being here. And I think each of us can take action, and even a smallest action can bring change and can deliver better social justice. So as I said before, the motivation for my writing is to fight for social justice. And these are some of the groups whose rights I fight for: justice for children, justice for women, justice for victims of war, and justice for the environment. So maybe I can read now a little bit from the Mountain Sing and talk about some of those issues that I mentioned above. So the Mountain Sing, as I said, took me 7 years to write. It's inspired by my family experiences, but I interviewed hundreds of people to be able to write this book. I wrote this book to honor, you know, the memories of the older generations of Vietnam, whom I feel are being left behind, whom I feel are unable to share their stories because they suffer so much trauma, you know. And as you may know, for the traumatized people, it's very difficult to open up. And so you know, it was my honor to be able to speak to many of older women, you know, and to document their stories into this book. You know, in this book there is a story. You know, this book is told in the voices of Grandma Diệp Lan and her granddaughter Hương. And if you read the novel, you will find out that Grandma Diệp Lan, during the land reform, she had to run away with her many children. She had to abandon one after the next to strangers to be able to save them. And this is the real life story of the grandmother of one of my friends. So even though this book is fictional, it has countless real life stories. So I'm going to read a little bit from page 103. On April 30th, 1975, news of the Northern Army taking over Saigon came, bringing torrents of people out of their homes. The resistance war against America had truly ended. Vietnam was now united. The North and South had again become the body of one nation. People were singing, dancing, twirling our flag in their hands. The red flag, centered by a yellow star, soared like flames along each street, each road, each winding lane. Speeches and songs played from public speakers praising the heroism of the Northern Vietnamese army, applauding our people for defeating the Americans and their Southern regime. Looking back, I wish I had understood more fully the significance of this day. It marked the end of a bloodbath that had flooded our country for nearly 20 years, drowning more than 3 million people, leaving millions of others injured, traumatized, and displaced. Once I read an article about the bombs that had been dropped during our war, and the number stunned me. 7 million tons. You know, as when I was 6 years old, my family moved from North Vietnam to South Vietnam. You know, so I was born in a small village in the north of Vietnam called Cuong Du village, and my earliest memories was one of many women who were waiting for the return of their loved ones. And each day, you know, they would go to work and they return home and they would stand outside their gate, looking out to the road and waiting for the return of their son or of their husbands. Um, and and you know, when I was 6 years old, my family uprooted ourselves from that village and we moved south because the south of Vietnam was more fertile. You know, the weather was better. It was better for farming because my parents were both teachers and farmers. And along the road, along the way to the south, as we traveled by train, I saw so many bomb craters that was so big. And later I would ride in the mountains thing, you know, the bomb craters look like footsteps of a gigantic flock of animals that rush through the earth, you know. It was really an incredible time. So I was growing up under the American embargo when we didn't have enough things to eat, when things were really difficult, and books gave me hope, you know. So I read books to be able to escape, you know, the difficult time at that time. And the most precious possession of my family was a bookshelf that my father built himself. And you know, and I love reading books such as Adventures of a Cricket or Diary of a Cricket, which I included in this book, in the mountain thing. So you know, in when I was in the south of Vietnam, I saw women waiting again, you know, women who were waiting for the return of their sons, of their fathers who did not return from the war, and also of their family members who had been put into re-education camps. So it was, you know, at a time because Vietnam had just been divided into North and South. So, you know, moving to South Vietnam, I felt like a refugee because people in the South didn't like the people in the North at all. So it was a really difficult time. But I think because I grew up in both parts of Vietnam, I could see how much people of both sides, you know, suffered. You know, in Vietnamese, we in Vietnam we have a beloved poet. His name is Nguyễn Duy, and he wrote this verse: nói cho cùng trong mỗi cuộc chiến tranh, phe nào thắng thì nhân dân đều bại. In the end of each and every war, whoever wins, the people always lose. You know, wars and armed conflicts are terrible. They cause such devastation on citizens, on the landscape, on the culture, on so many things. So recently, I was asked to give support to a documentary, and the director and the producers, contacted me, and when I read the title of the documentary, the women who won the war, I told them, no one won this war, and I don't want to support a work of propaganda. So I want to include stories from women of both sides. I want to show the suffering through the wars and the courage of women, and what they need to do to rescue their family. Thankfully, now the team, I proposed a new name for this documentary, and the women who shouldered the war. And luckily they accepted it, because I think the idea of the team is to show how the war, the Vietnam War, affected the women of Vietnam. But I think the language of, especially the title, is really important, because I do not want to glorify war. The reason why we have so many wars is that we glorify wars and conflict. We glorify heroes. There are so many stories about heroes born out of wars. And I remember a friend of mine, this friend hasn't found the remains of his father who fought in the Vietnam War. And in Vietnam, in Vietnamese culture, we believe that if a person dies without the family knowing where the grave is, the person will become a wandering ghost. Because for this person to come home, the family has to know where the grave is, to be able to burn incense, to bring the soul home through the smoke of the incense. So not knowing the grave is, this person under that grave is a wandering ghost. So my friend, his mom told him, we need to find your father's remains, otherwise when I die I won't be able to close my eyes. So my friend has been spending all of his savings, year after year. He's been going to the jungles and tracing the journey his father had taken, in the hope to find the remains of his father somehow. And he told me, you writers have blood on your pen. When we glorify wars, we encourage people to go to wars and maybe die unnecessarily. So that's why the purpose of my writing is to write about violence, but to call for peace, and for people to love people, humans to love humans more. One of the issues that I highlighted in the Mountain Sing is the issue of Agent Orange. When many readers, after reading the book, they told me they were surprised to know that Agent Orange is still so significant in Vietnam, and it's still affecting millions of people, and many people outside Vietnam don't know that. And recently I talked to a Vietnamese friend in Vietnam, and he said Agent Orange doesn't cause birth defects. So I had to have a serious discussion with him, and I said, you need to go to the museum, the War Remnants Museum in Ho Chi Minh City. So if you in the audience today, if you travel to Vietnam, I encourage you to go to that museum. In that museum, you will see, jars with baby, the fetuses, deformed babies born dead. They are kept in jars. So in the book, I wrote about Uncle Sang, his wife giving birth to a deformed baby, and this is the situation which is still happening in Vietnam. So I would like to share with you an article that I wrote an article called America. Please don't forget the victims of Agent Orange on the New York Times. I hope that you can check it out and read it, because it highlights, you know, the many things that that Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Laotians still suffer from the impact of Agent Orange. And in fact, you know, many American veterans are still suffering from the impact of Agent Orange. How are we doing with the time, Carol?
We're more, whoops, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We're at 7:41 right now. So whenever you're finished with, we do have some audience members to ask questions too. So whenever
Okay,
you're ready.
great. So I stopped just in time. I would welcome your questions. Thank you.
Yes. So if you would like to ask a question of our author this evening or make a comment, please feel welcome to come up to the mic.
Hi, I'm Danielle. Is this on? Hi, I'm Danielle. I'd just like to ask, what was your first book? You may have mentioned it, but I didn't hear.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. My book is called The Secret of Hoa Sen. Hoa Sen means lotus flower.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your question.
Well, first, thank you for being with us. When you started writing your novel, had you thought about writing a nonfiction book? Because it was, I know it was a novel, but it seemed so true that the people were experiencing it. So I don't know if you planned on maybe writing nonfiction initially.
Oh, thank you so much for this question. Um, yeah, I think it would be impossible to write a nonfiction book about the topic, because I interviewed so many people, and I feel like each person's story could be written into a book. Because, you know, people have gone through so much. You know, every family in Vietnam has experienced, you know, all of the historical events that I mentioned in the book. So it was and somehow, you know, I did write a nonfiction account of my own family's experiences, especially during the time when we moved to the South, and the discrimination by that we faced. So, you know, the discrimination by Vietnamese people against ourselves, and it's so painful. And I haven't even shown that book to my agent. I feel like if I publish that book, I would betray my parents, because they had to make really difficult decisions during that time. And as a nonfiction, you know, you account, you have to be really truthful. So I feel like I would betray my parents. So I haven't shown that book to anyone yet. Thank you.
And I did have the privilege of seeing you at the Dayton Literary Peace thing, and we appreciated your remarks then also. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. I want to hug you.
Anyone else?
I was curious. First, I wanted to tell you my book club read your book.
Thank you.
And we loved it, and it was a great discussion. It was just so wonderful to read a book about Vietnam from a Vietnamese viewpoint instead of a United States viewpoint. So it was awesome. But I'm curious if you had a favorite character, and if there was a character that was difficult for you to write about.
Oh, thank you. Um, I think my favorite character must be Grandma Diệu Lan, because when I was born, both of my grandmothers had died. So I was really jealous of friends who had grandmothers to tell them stories, So I told myself one day I would write a novel with a grandmother in it, so I would have a grandma. So in writing Grandma Zutlan, I could imagine having a grandmother, and it was the best thing, that I got to listen to her story. I got to go on her adventures. I got to experience her courage, her sense of hope, her belief in humanity. I learned so much about myself when I wrote that book and what I yearned for. So my family doesn't even have any picture of my grandmother, so I have no idea what they look like. But in writing this book and after publishing it, I feel like I have a grandmother. So thank you for celebrating my grandmothers with me by reading this book. For a character who's difficult to write, I think there are two characters. One is Wicked Ghost, who happens to, so my grandmother, my father's mother, was killed in the Great Hunger on a cornfield by a villager, who lived in the same village with my family. So what happened is that during the Great Hunger, which happened when the French and the Japanese were occupying Vietnam, my grandma, my father and his sister were really hungry. So my grandma ventured into a cornfield to try and steal corn for them. And the guard of that cornfield caught her and tied her to the corn plants. And she was too weak to break away, so she died there. So my father told me about this man, and that after the Great Hunger, he went to the South with the French, and we don't know what happened to him afterwards. And I wanted to revenge, I wanted to take revenge. I invented Wicked Ghost. I wanted to do terrible things to him, and that's what fiction can do, right? But I found out that I'm not a violent person, and I found forgiveness instead. But it was really difficult to write about him and to write about Great Hunger and the land reform, those horrific moments. They were still alive in the memories of the people who told them, who told me their personal stories, still alive in the memories of my father. And I think in writing in English, somehow, I could distance myself from it, from that pain. Otherwise, I'm not sure if I could write about the Great Hunger in Vietnamese. That would be too painful. So English provided me with some distance for me to be able to process the trauma and step away from it to be able to write about it. The second character who's very difficult to write about is Ngọc, Hương mother, who returned from the war, who was very traumatized. And to write her diary entries, I think I needed a PhD. So if with my PhD, I researched about PTSD and trauma. I read many theories about PTSD and trauma and the manifestation of all of these of PTSD and trauma in its victims. And so I needed to understand it, and I read a lot of work from veterans who went through the war and who knew what having PTSD was like. So I wrote these entries, and these if you read the novel, you will notice that Ngọc Hương mother, penned the diary entries after returning from the war. And those entries were really difficult for me to write. And I worked for months on them, and they did not feel right until one day I decided to write them in Vietnamese. And I began with the words anh ơi, and anh ơi is the word we call our beloved. And I started writing it, and I was crying so much, and then I switched to English. So sometimes, Vietnamese was the key for me to open the door to a story. But sometimes the English, provided some distance for me to be able to write about something painful. So I'm really lucky I'm able to write in two languages. Thank you so much for your question and for reading my novel with the book club. Please send my regards to all members of your book club. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to come up and ask a question or make a comment?
Is that why you put in the book the Vietnamese sentence first and then translated it kind of next to it?
Oh, yes. So, I thank you for the question. Thank you. So, Vietnamese language is so important. I think I wanted to decolonize literature in English about Vietnam with this book. For example, if you notice, my name, Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai, appears in full diacritical marks. And, when I published this novel, I told my publisher, I am willing to sacrifice the commercial value of my novel to honor Vietnamese language, because our language, our culture has suffered a lot of loss because of colonization, imperialism. Normally Vietnamese language, when published as a part of the when Vietnamese language is published as part of the English text, it's stripped away from diacritical marks. And I wanted to return those marks to our language, with this novel. So, and I go beyond that. I insert a lot of words, of Vietnamese words, Vietnamese phrases sometimes without translation, because I encourage the reader to fully immerse themselves into Vietnamese setting with this book, and I want readers to feel Vietnam rather than just to understand. I want people to arrive in Vietnam with their heart, not just with their mind. I want them to feel, for example, feel the beautiful, the beauty of Hanoi through the colors of the flowers, through the breeze from the lake, and not just understanding everything which goes on. So that's why, sometimes, so some readers say it's difficult to read my novel because I have Vietnamese language there, and all of the names of the characters are in the authentic Vietnamese ways and difficult to remember. But I think any reader who is reading this book shows respect to the Vietnamese culture, because you accept our language as it is. You don't expect us to modify our language to serve your preferences, So I don't want to make I don't want to modify our language to fit the eyes and ears of Western readers. And so I really appreciate anyone who reads this novel and feels connected with it. Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a question.
Yes, Carol.
What's going on in our news right now? What advice would you give to the people of Ukraine?
Oh, it's a painful question. Have hope for humanity, hope for a better world, and survive. Just survive. And I don't know. I did not believe that this war would take place, and I really believe that as a community, we would be able to do something about that, provide more protection, more help for the people in Ukraine. But we haven't done much, I mean, I think, it was shocking to a lot of people in the beginning, but now it has faded. The war has become another war, just another war. And as among so many wars that have happened on this earth, so that's really so painful for me to accept. And sometimes I still can't sleep because I feel for the refugees who have to escape Ukraine, and for all of those innocent people whose lives were robbed away from them. So I think to prevent things like Ukraine from happening, every one of us has to work harder to protect peace, because peace is so fragile. You know, our decision affects peace. For example, you know, when we vote for the right leader of our community or not, you know, we affect world politics, you know. So, you know, we are all interconnected. We are not alone. You know, the pandemic has shown us, the war in Ukraine has shown us that we are all connected with each other. So let's do more for peace, and I really hope that we can do more for the people in Ukraine. Thank you.
Anything else from our audience this evening? Would you have any parting words for us this evening?
Oh, can I see the audience? Can I wave to everyone who's there? Is it possible to? Hi, so good to see you. Oh, so many people are there. Thank you so much for being there. I want to be there and I want to hug all of you. Thank you so much for coming and for attending the event today. I really hope I can, return to Dayton. I had wonderful memories there, and I want to tell you, when I was there, I met the wonderful Margaret Atwood, whom I adore. And after my speech, she gave me the biggest hug, and she read my poem. She was spending 15 minutes reading my poems, and she's like my hero, the Margaret Atwood, right? So people ask me, what did she tell you? And to tell you the truth, I can't remember, because I was just so shocked that she even held, you know, my hands in her hands, and she was telling me so many things, and it was just so wonderful. So I really hope to come back to Dayton next year when I have my book tour to the US. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad to see you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Okay, I need to take a picture for memory. Hang on. Cheers. Okay, picture taken. Thank you.
thank you so much, Dr. Quế Mai, for a lovely and thoughtful conversation to start our series. And it has been a real honor.
Thank you so much, Carol, and your team. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. Carol, you have been doing such a great job, and I know that you know, you've been having some health issues, but I hope you're feeling better today. And thank you for being here and for moderating the event and doing such a great job. Thank you, everyone, for having me today.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Now I will go to sleep. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. I had a great time. I feel like it's morning time. I'm not tired at all.
Yes, it was recorded and will be on our website. Tonight, she's in Austria. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And please get some much deserved sleep.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Thank you. I'll come back and sign the your copy of the book. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. Tạm biệt. Bye. Thank you,
night.
Yeah, I
everyone.
can't wait for the next one. It was
Bye-bye.
just
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.